Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take your stack of sources and turn them into crystal clear insight. Today, we are tackling, maybe the ultimate human question, the big one. What is the point of it all? We're going deep into some really profound ancient wisdoms, specifically the first chapter of Ecclesiastes. And its conclusion about fulfillment is, well, it's devastating at first, but also surprisingly hopeful.
It's such an unexpected voice to find in a text like this. The speaker, who's just called the teacher, isn't some idealist. This is a guy who, by all accounts, won at everything. He had wisdom, incredible wealth, total power. You could almost call him the world's first billionaire burnout. He's the expert who got everything the world has to offer and just felt empty.
And that's really our mission for this deep dive, right? To unpack that feeling, that futility. We need to understand his core observation that everything, all our work, all the cycles of nature, is just a chasing after the wind. It sounds like pure despair, but the sources are pretty clear that this despair is actually the first step toward a crucial redirect.
Yeah, and the hook is just so immediate. He opens with this declaration, meaningless. Meaningless. Everything is meaningless. That's the anchor for the whole discussion. And it forces you to ask the question he poses right after. What does man gain from all his labor at which he toils under the sun?
And that just hits so hard today. We live in a culture that measures your entire life by your labor, by your achievement. We assume all that work has to add up to something. But he's asking, okay, after all the striving, what's the actual lasting profit?
And that idea of lasting profit really hinges on the context he gives, under the sun. That phrase is so critical. It's the lens for everything he's about to say. He's deliberately limiting his view to a purely earthly, horizontal perspective. It's life viewed without any reverence to God or anything transcendent.
Wait, so is he saying that science or philosophy or just observing the world is pointless? Or is it only pointless if you leave out that transcendent frame?
It's the second one. He's saying, look, if you apply rigorous observation only within this closed system of Earth, the conclusion is kind of inescapable. The system is cyclical. It's not actually progressing towards some ultimate goal. If you remove the spiritual dimension, his logic is actually pretty solid.
Okay, let's go there then. Let's look at that purely earthly view, because he kicks off his argument by looking at, well, just physics and nature. He sees these cycles that just seem endless and kind of purposeless.
Exactly. He's not talking about meaning. He's just observing repetition, pure repetition. Think about what he points to. The sun. It rises, it sets, and then it, hurries right back to where it started. The wind just blows in these endless circles. There's no rest, no destination.
And the water imagery he uses. Streams are always flowing to the sea, but the sea is never full. That one is probably the most powerful image of just perpetual unsatisfied motion.
It perfectly captures it. This idea of ceaseless striving that never, ever reaches completion. Every river is trying to fill the ocean, but the ocean doesn't really change. It's all activity, but no final satisfaction.
That resonates so much with modern life, doesn't it? It's the endless email inbox. It's the next product launch, the social media feed you can never get to the bottom of. We're constantly pouring all this energy into a cycle that just never gets full. It never rests.
And that's the core realization. The cycle itself doesn't provide any ultimate meaning. And if nature is trapped in these patterns, well, the teacher immediately pivots to us, to the human element.
Right, because we like to think we're different. We think we break the cycles. We create art, we build things, we develop technology. Surely we leave a lasting mark.
And this is where his perspective gets maybe the most sobering. He just observes that generations come and go, but the Earth itself remains. The planet just keeps on turning, almost indifferent to all our individual stories.
And this is where it challenges you, the listener, right, in your core drive for legacy. You might be putting in 80 hours a week on something you hope will define your whole career. You want to be remembered.
But the reality, when you're only looking under the sun, is that all human achievement is temporary. It's not just that we don't remember the brilliant people from, say, 300 years ago. Their names are just gone. The teacher also warns that the people coming after us won't be remembered by the people who follow them either. The slate just keeps getting wiped clean.
That's a huge psychological hurdle. This pressure we feel to make our mark is maybe based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how things work.
It creates what the text calls an exhausting burden. If you're striving for a kind of immortality through your work, building a company, writing a book, you're chasing the wind, because the only thing that lasts in that closed system is the Earth itself. And this realization is really meant to give us some humility about our place in the grand scheme of things.
Okay, so if physical labor doesn't satisfy, what about the mind? I mean, that's our ultimate tool, right? Intellect. The teacher wasn't just wealthy, he was incredibly wise.
And that's his critical test case. He didn't come to this conclusion because he was ignorant. The sources say he dedicated himself to wisdom more than anyone before him. He used his mind to explore everything that happens under heaven. If anyone could find fulfillment through just being smart, it was him.
And yet, his conclusion about knowledge it's so counterintuitive, it's almost painful. He says, "For with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief."
Right, it completely flips that old saying, knowledge is power. In this context, knowledge is a source of suffering, and you have to ask why. Well, it's because the more you understand, the more you become aware of life's fundamental problems, the injustices, the flaws in the system.
I can see that. If I'm totally ignorant of a huge systemic problem, I can be happy. But once I really understand how broken something is, how complex it is, and I realize I can't fix it, that knowledge becomes a heavyweight.
Precisely. Wisdom shows you the limits of your own power. You see the cycles of human foolishness, the futility of some systems, your own mortality. You see how often the wicked seem to get ahead and the good people suffer. The smarter you get, the more clearly you see the problems that you personally cannot solve.
So the search for objective truth, if it's disconnected from some kind of ultimate transcendent meaning, it just leaves you stranded. You see all the misery, but you have no solution. It makes you sadder.
It's the mind getting exhausted. It realizes it can analyze the system perfectly, but it can't escape it. So the teacher concludes that even this intense intellectual journey, if it's not connected to a creator, is also just a chasing after the wind, an empty exercise.
Okay, so we've laid out the problem, whether it's through nature or human achievement or even intellect, a purely earthly outlook just. It doesn't lead to lasting satisfaction. But if everything is really meaningless, then why do we feel so discontented about it? Why are we so restless? Why do we even bother searching?
That restlessness is the pivot. It's the whole point. The teacher has just proven, very carefully, that the world under the sun will always leave you feeling dissatisfied. So if everything inside the box disappoints you, maybe that disappointment isn't a flaw. Maybe it's a sign that you were meant to look outside the box.
So the emptiness we feel isn't the problem, it's a feature. Wow, that completely flips the modern script. We're always told to look harder inside ourselves or find the next thing in the world to satisfy us.
The text calls it a divine design. Later in the book, the teacher says God has placed eternity in our hearts. That dissatisfaction isn't a bug, it's a homing beacon. We feel restless because we are trying to find infinite satisfaction in a finite world, and it's just never going to fit. The meaninglessness is God's way of redirecting us, of stripping away our illusions.
That's a fundamental shift. So instead of our dissatisfaction being a sign of personal failure, it's proof we were made for something more. Okay, but what does that look like on a Monday morning? How do we actually reorient our lives with this?
This is where the ancient wisdom gets incredibly practical. It's all about reorientation and removing that exhausting burden of trying to achieve immortality through our jobs.
So let's start with the first application, reorienting our time.
It means you have to consciously acknowledge that your purpose comes from a relationship with your creator, not from your own productivity. And the practice suggested is really simple, but, well, it's challenging. Recognize your need for God before you check your phone, before the news, before you dive into work. If your first connection of the day is to the infinite, everything else shrinks to its proper size. But if it's to the endless demands of your inbox, you're right back in that exhausting cycle.
That reframes the entire morning. Purpose from relationship, not productivity.
Okay, what about the pressure? The pressure to be the best, to be remembered forever. That leads right into the second takeaway. Cultivate humility. When you recognize you're just a part of a much bigger story, that God's purposes are way bigger than your individual career, you are suddenly freed from all that paralyzing pressure. The goal isn't to save the world with your one big project. It's just to do your work with excellence, inside the context of the bigger story God is writing.
That seems like it would be a massive relief for anxiety. If I accept that my work is temporary, I can actually do it better without that crippling fear of it not being permanent.
Exactly. And that allows for the third application. Maintain eternal perspective. When the daily stress hits, the overwhelming deadline, the harsh criticism, a financial setback, the source advises you to ask a really simple question. Just ask, will this matter in eternity?
That question just puts everything into proportion instantly, doesn't it? It doesn't mean you stop caring, but it stops these temporary things from owning you.
It helps you keep perspective. The deadline matters for today, sure, but its ultimate existential weight is basically zero. This perspective just drains the anxiety out of things that feel like life or death struggles.
And finally, let's go back to the wise man. If all that knowledge just led him to grief, how are we supposed to keep learning without falling into despair ourselves?
The application here is to balance wisdom with faith. We are absolutely meant to learn and pursue knowledge, but we have to know its limits. Intellectual pursuit has to be grounded in reverence for God. Otherwise, it just leads you back to one of two places: pride, where you think you can solve everything, or despair when you realize you can't.
The proverb is key here, isn't it?
Right.
The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Knowledge without that foundation leads to sorrow, but knowledge built on it can lead to meaning.
That is the critical distinction. True wisdom integrates the facts under the sun with the perspective from above the sun.
Okay, let's connect all this directly to our world right now, because everything the teacher observed thousands of years ago, it feels like a precise diagnosis of modern life.
It absolutely confirms what some call the modern anxiety epidemic. We have built the ultimate under-the-sun society. It promises fulfillment through achievement, through consumption, through experiences. And yet, that core promise of satisfaction feels broken.
We have more comfort, more entertainment, more ways to connect than any humans in history. And yet we're seeing these skyrocketing rates of anxiety, depression, and just epidemic loneliness.
It's the frantic chase, the chase for the next achievement, the next dopamine hit from a notification, the next experience, because the last one didn't quite do it. It left us empty. That constant striving is just a modern version of what the teacher saw. When you live only for the finite world, everything eventually feels futile.
So the genius of this ancient text isn't to tell us not to achieve things. It's to strip away the illusion that our achievements can give us ultimate meaning. It's a redirect.
That is the core takeaway. This whole chapter is the setup. It forces you to admit you have a hole in your heart the size of eternity. The teacher's final conclusion, later in the book, is that meaning is found in revering God and keeping his commandments. But you can't get there until you first realize that nothing else is ever going to fill that void.
Powerful stuff. And for you, as you go into your week, dealing with all its demands, building on what we've unpacked, here's the final provocative thought to sit with.
Yeah.
What would it actually look like for you to practically begin each day acknowledging your need for God before you start your work or check your newsfeed? Think about how that one simple reorientation might reduce the exhausting burden of striving, freeing you up to just focus on the work itself. And on that note, we encourage you to continue exploring, learning, and diving deep into stories that inspire and challenge you. Until next time.